Hey, what's up, Blazer fans? Welcome to We Have a Take the What podcast. I am Tara Bowen Biggs, and I am joined, as always, by Rose Harding. Hi, Rose.
Hi, Tara. How are you doing?
I am doing good. I love your bright new hair. For those who
Thank
can't
you.
see it, it's kind of like, a purplish, pinkish rose color. Like if you were to go to the rose garden right now, where all the roses are beautifully in bloom, you would definitely find some roses that color.
It's funny. I do think that my stylist told me that this is like a dusty rose, like a rose mauve.
Well, there you
So
go.
you nailed it.
Well, it's great to see you. And we have a very special guest joining us today. Excited to introduce you. We are talking today with Bruce Poinsett. He is a writer and community organizer based in the Portland metro area. And he's also the host of the Bruce Poinsett Show, which you can hear on Numbers FM, or you can also find it on his YouTube channel. Hi, Bruce. Welcome to the show.
Hey Tara, hey Rose, thank you for having me.
I've been looking forward to this all week because I won't tell the long story of the Vanderpump journey, but I've been spending a lot of time lately on Bravo Media, which is very different from Blazer Media. And so I've been a little bit out of touch with what's going on in the NBA and just the Blazers in general. And so I had to like dip back into basketball media. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to talk to somebody about this. And with your journalism and media background, I'm really excited to kind of like dive into what's going on right now and the sources that we follow or don't follow. So that's what we're going to do today. But you want to get us started with our icebreaker?
Yeah, I do. I just want to say, I think it's really funny that in the off season so far, everything that we've done on this podcast more or less revolves around what's happening on Vanderpump Rules.
I mean, it's a cultural moment for some of us, but it's over now.
Um, Icebreaker today. So Tara and I we checked back in on the finals like a couple of weeks ago, but I want to check back in with this group. Who are you rooting for in the finals, and how do you feel about it? Tara, I want to start with you because you recently told me that you're now watching the finals, even though I think the last time we recorded, you were like, I look at the scores. And I would like to know how this happened, how now you're suddenly watching the finals.
Well, it was kind of driving me crazy because I couldn't watch because I just have do streaming and I couldn't find it. And so I went old school and I got an antenna. And so now I can watch live sports, at least the ones that are on some of the major networks. And so like before it was like I had to work like really hard to find it, and now it's easy. So I've definitely started watching, and I'm rooting for the Nuggets. And the way I feel about that is not great because I've been like a faithful Nugget basher for many, many years, but I'm going
This
to,
tradition.
yeah. But I decided that I'm going to actually take partial credit for the Nuggets' success, because those 2 years that the Nuggets lost out on making the playoffs at the last game of the season, I made so much fun of them for that. And I gave all my friends who are Nuggets fans like the worst time about that. And the whole time I was doing it, I knew I was like, I'm going to pay for this. I'm going to pay for this. I'm going to pay for this. So I've decided to say it's paying off in the hard work that the Nuggets have they've kept grinding. They didn't change a whole lot. They just kept going and they made it to the finals, and they're actually also like really fun to watch. So I'm feeling okay about it, better than I thought I would.
All right. That's I mean that's as good as you can hope for, right? Because by the time you get down to two teams, you might be looking at like, something that's miserable versus something that's miserable. And you just kind of gotta like choose a path to enjoy them or not, or root against them both and just root for chaos. That's a thing. That's a position. Bruce, how about you?
Yeah, so one Tara, I appreciate that because I'm very much I'm rooting for Miami. It's not going well, obviously. Probably done tomorrow. But I've also, I don't know, maybe this is petty, but I've been bothered by the embrace, like not during the finals, but like feels like over these last 2 years of like some Portland fans with the Nuggets, just because of that same history of like, I remember 2019, actually even before 2019, I remember Nurk's first game against them, the have a nice summer game. Like that holds a special place in my heart. 2019, obviously, 2021 playoffs that hurt hurt a lot. But it's that thing where, especially with Jokic, who's obviously a transcendent player, and you have great players, but when they torture your team specifically, you don't just like run to them. Yet at least give it a few years, make it, you gotta have some time. So I'm finally getting to that place where I'm like, I guess I gotta accept this. I wanted to not believe in the Nuggets going into the playoffs. I was like, just telling people, look, they gotta show me. Gotta show me. And they've been showing me. So yeah, it's I root for Miami. I hope a miracle can happen, but no, the Nuggets just like I have this old shirt with that what's the slogan? It's like hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And it's like the Nuggets are talented and they play as hard as everyone. It's just like, yeah, this is real. Yeah.
I think that is a very reasonable position to have as a Blazer fan. Like when they're like well, okay, so divisions don't matter as much as they used to matter, but like, when they're in your division, it's like hard to root for a division rival. Like at your core, you're like, but I hate you. And
we used to be able to at least root for Will Barton.
Yeah, totally.
And now we don't even have that anymore. So that was kind of hard.
Also, the idea that they're gonna win it all the year after they got rid of Will Barton, like. So here's the thing that I feel about Jokic. I've been thinking about this a long time, because now all of a sudden the media is like, oh yeah, we're finally paying attention to this player who's been a god for years, but he was so uninteresting, we weren't interested in covering him. And now that there's no other, like, LeBron is gone, like all these guys that they were liking to cover over a guy like Jokic are gone, they're forced to cover him, and they're like, oh wow, he's a pretty amazing player. So I feel like I have sent my child, the Portland Trailblazers, to the same preschool as the Denver Nuggets for a very long time. I have seen their warts. I know what kind of kids that they were. I know who acted up. I know like what they're like, the things that I was like, ooh, that's going to be a problem if your mom doesn't step in and fix that. Like, I have examined them a lot because they've been at the same preschool as my kid for years. And what I'm finally seeing is Jokic, who which by the way, like Tara knows this, I used to make a lot of funny comparisons about Jokic being a giant baby man, because he has like he has like a buzzed haircut, like a buzzed head, and he's like, how everybody's like, oh, he's fit, but he's flabby, like he just has like kind of a childlike body, but he's 7 feet tall. And when he gets tired, like I swear, he like tugs on his shirt and like his like jersey, and he like touches his ear.
Yeah,
like
it's
that's like
pulling
tired,
his ears.
yeah, the tired baby attitude. Like any parent will like look at that and be like, oh, that's a tired child, and that kid's gonna like be like, no, I don't need a nap, but that kid's also gonna pass out in his car seat on the ride home. So anyway, he has some very like baby-like qualities to me, which is where I come to this like metaphor about my child going to the same preschool as the Nuggets. But I feel like I'm looking at Jokic and I'm like, oh, look, his parents, they worked it out. Good for them. Like this kid that I thought was a little bit problematic. Oh, good for you. Like, so I can like kind of root for him as like a kid who grew up with my kid, but it doesn't mean that I liked him when our kids were in preschool together. But I'm glad that they've like, I don't know, found their way out of their problems that I didn't like back then. And I'll just see them for what they are, as like, our kids don't go to the same school anymore, and good for you. I'm glad your life is good.
I love the mental gymnastics that we had to put our minds through in order to accept the fact that this team that's so good is probably going to win the championship.
I will say though, if I were choosing individual players or people to root for, it would be much easier for me to get on board with the Heat, because there's so many more likable things about the Heat to me as like individual players. And like Spoelstra's there and he's from Portland, and like I don't know, like there's just like there's something really likable about Jimmy Butler when he's not kicking your ass, like so
or
like
his
for
teammates.
yeah, totally. So like for like individual guys, like I totally get the Heat. I also have like a special place in my heart for Kyle Lowry. I think his kids are super cute. And I think that he's kind of like underrated because people like don't like, they think that he looks unimpressive, but he is absolutely a championship piece because we know he already, he has a ring. Like he's he's been good for Miami and what he's supposed to do. Like, I don't know. I have a special place in my heart for Kyle Lowry.
Not so much on
Oh,
for me.
okay. Well,
Okay.
that's okay. We don't have to like the same guys.
Right. There's a lot of players and we can all have different feelings. I was thinking about how if I was actually thinking about this for icebreaker and I was like, this is way too complicated. But if anybody wants to weigh in on it, feel free. But I was thinking like, okay, if you were pretend you're an NBA player and it's free agency, which team would you want to sign with? And I was shocked as I was going through this in my mind to find out that I think I would go with veterans minimum for 1 year to Miami just to learn how they do it. Like that is not my ethos at all, is the just like the hard charging, weigh in and culture. Like that so does not speak to me, but I would be fascinated to participate in it and learn how it works. And then I would go to some other team, me with my, fantastic NBA free agent ability to choose where I went. But I was just thinking it would be interesting to go there for like a year if you were a player to learn what that culture is all about.
That's
just imagine.
That's interesting.
I was just gonna say, I think, one with Miami, just so like all old coaches I remember all love Miami just because of the emphasis on conditioning and when you talk about just being a free agent, where it sounds, at least like in all these interviews, there's an allusion to either you were either scared off by that or you embrace it, right? So like Jimmy's the perfect example. But yeah, just the ability to go there, you have this almost militaristic discipline, but like there is value as far as like training you to win, training the mentality. It's not a coincidence that you have 7 guys who went undrafted who, whether Miami pays them next year, which I don't think that's mathematically possible, they, through their stint, they are going to be set just by going through this program. And like, that is wild. And also Spo, like, I just love this. He had the quote about, says like he empowers players to their strengths and protects them from their weaknesses, something like that. And it's like, I appreciate that in a coach, someone who's like literally coaches all 15 guys, because it's not like it seems like something that would just make sense. Injuries happen. You should probably do that. A lot of coaches don't.
Yeah, Spoelstra's so interesting to me because he's, I think he got his start as a video coordinator, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like he was a coach at the University of Portland for a while. Or maybe he just played there. I don't remember now. But he's from Jesuit. He went to high school like 10 minutes from my house. And I just think it's really interesting that Miami, like this, like kind of like this dynasty, like Pat Riley organization, like just groomed a guy from like the ground up, and now he's their head coach. And he's just like stuck it out there. And I don't know. It really speaks to that culture and not being necessarily just about players, but also about like, staff and organization. And I think you're right. Going there for 1 year would be very, very interesting. And also like think about like the way that players are perceived after they have success in a place like Miami. Like the whole like narrative of their career is set. And people are going to be far more interested in you than if they were interested in a guy who was successful in, say, Orlando, just down the road.
Mm-hmm.
It just speaks different of you. And like narrative is like, it's weird how narrative follow guys around, like for sometimes their whole career.
Mm-hmm. Well, according to the internet, Damian Lillard is going to go play for Miami in return for Tyler Hero. So apparently that's going to be our new reality in the next couple weeks.
That's right. It's like Tyler Hero and a 2012 Chevy Silverado with 200,000 city miles on it, and Miami fans are not into it because it's too much. Like, I'm sorry. Some of the trade, I'm so annoyed at the people who are proposing trades for Dame, and you watch like other fan bases be like, no way, he's not worth that. I'm like, are you crazy? There are other people as good as that guy, and there's nobody else as good as Damian Lillard and what he does. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. That Chevy Silverado, you're gonna have to throw that in plus some.
This isn't the '60s and trading Bill Russell or the rights to Bill Russell for the ice capades. Can't do that. Not doing that anymore.
Who was it that recently traded for a coach? Was it that how they got Doc to Philly?
I think it's like they got Doc to the Clippers doing that.
Oh, okay, yeah. I didn't know that coaches could be traded like that though, and until that happened. I was like,
Mhm.
oh, we can trade coaches? Because I would be interested in maybe trading some coaches. Like, why do we just give organizations the right to interview our coaches? Why don't we trade them for something?
I want to look up how that happens because I can't quite I know that it's possible. I know that there was a trade involved, but I just can't, I don't understand how it worked. Like, what did they trade him for another coach? Do you remember, Bruce?
I don't think it was another coach. I think it was picks, maybe like
I have to look it
future.
up because it's been like, what?
Yeah,
Maybe
no,
it's
Rose.
just for head coaches,
I
not
don't
for
know.
assistants. Because I'm saying, like, people like want to interview everyone's assistants all the time. I'm like, why aren't we trading these guys instead of just letting them walk for free? But maybe I just don't know how it works. I mean, not maybe. I definitely don't know how it works to trade coaches, but I'm just saying, like, we could have gotten some value out of our assistants before they left.
Well, we'll figure that out in a future episode. But right now, let's pivot and get to learn Bruce a little bit more. So, Bruce, the basic question we ask the people when they come on for the first time is, how did you get into basketball and how did you get into the Blazers? What's your story?
Yeah, so it's like I remember actually being interested in basketball from like, very early in terms of like just like consciousness. So, I was probably like 2 or 3 when the Blazers were, in that Clyde Drexler Fab Five time. So obviously I wasn't, plugged in like that, but I knew of it. I remember the Blazers versus Bulls video game for Super Nintendo. I remember going to the Coliseum for some games like way back when. But actually, like my favorite player, mainly because I had like a very early growth spurt. So I just like towered over everyone. So Shaq was my favorite player. So I loved Orlando. I was sad watching them get swept by the Rockets. And then he went to the Lakers. So I became a Laker fan, which was interesting because, I remember being at like I'll say it's like a Mother's Day party or something during the infamous Game 7 in 2000 and being this little kid rooting for the Lakers in a room full of Blazer fans, some intoxicated. And that was a roller coaster.
That must have been
Obviously,
uncomfortable at some points.
I mean, it was uncomfortable for about three quarters and a few minutes. And then it got, you know, I mean, I was a bit obnoxious that day, but it was a good time. That said, you know, uh, eventually I kind of, Shaq went to Miami, rode there. Shaq went to Phoenix. Things kind of started tailing off, and the Blazers. I was looking for like a new big man. I remember the Greg Oden time. I played high school basketball, so I followed all like the rivals coverage and all the recruiting sites. So before you were watching highlight tapes of players, just you're reading about Oden, Kevin Durant, OJ. I remember when OJ Mayo was for sure the next LeBron. I remember this time vividly. So, the Blazers drafted Oden. They had also got Brandon Roy the year earlier, which kind of brought me back a little bit just because like I really loved Roy as a player. So I'd say around that time I just got really back into just the Blazers. And I've kind of been a Blazers person since then, like fully. I definitely have a bunch of people who remember me from back in the day. It's like, I remember when you were rooting for Shaq, and I still hold something against that, mostly because of that Game 7, but it is what it is. So yeah, I love basketball. Like I said, was big early. I remember even we had an assignment, I want to say in like 7th grade, where you're supposed to like talk about your future and what you see. And of course, I'm a kid. I'm thinking it's going to be basketball. I'm going to be 6'8". I'm going to go to the NBA. It's all going to be wonderful. Cruel irony. A classmate actually lived that dream. So we talked about the Heat earlier. So Kevin Love plays on there. I was playing with him. Actually, if I shift over like this, you might see the state championship in the background.
Oh,
But
you guys were on the same team in high
yeah,
school.
yeah. You wouldn't know because I for some reason, again, the growth spurt thing, I thought I was going to be a center for a long time until I realized I wasn't. So, I spent a lot of time on the bench. Let's just put it that way. Again, because I was playing with an actual NBA player. But yeah, it's just like I think that really, really one inspired just well, not inspired, but just like, feel the love for the game from a playing standpoint, from a watching standpoint. Also, just wanted to shout you out, Tara, because it's one of the things I like really appreciate about following you and like, not having, we talked about this offline as far as, just this focus on not being just negative takes and living in misery, which is where these a lot of sports content is. And one, just I don't remember watching so many people appreciate Josh Hart in real time. So I just appreciate that, but also getting to that rivals thing because, pro athletes are public figures. And a lot of times people put a lot onto that. Build up, tear down. It's just kind of a thing. We do it reflexively. So, and I just noticed in talking with people, like, I feel like we don't put it together as far as just like how what's the word I'm looking for? Just like treating people like they're not humans, like obviously part of getting paid these big contracts is dealing with what comes with media coverage. But I think about it from a high school standpoint. So, reading those preseason reviews on rivals and like the first year you make varsity and it's like, oh, the newcomer Bruce Poinsett, the coach says he has a nose for the ball. And you're like, yes. And then by the time I left the team, it's like, so Bruce Poinsett and so are not here this year. Their contributions will be replaced, and being like it's one small sentence, but also being like pissed off from that again as like an inconsequential high schooler. So when I think about that magnified to like Stephen A. Smith talking about you every day or Skip Bayless talking about you every day, be like, well, LeBron should be able to take it. No, the way people talk about LeBron is crazy. Like, and we don't put it in context. We're like, oh, this is just normal. We've been doing it for 15 years now. So it's just like the thing. And I see that trickle over to someone like Dame, to, any of these players. And it's like, do people realize what we're doing? Because I don't think it was like this 15, 20 years ago. So that was a long rant past the answer. But yeah, once upon a time, I was very large. And I was like, oh, basketball. And also went to early Blazer games. So just to bring it back.
I did not put it together at all. I knew where you went to high school, but I did not put it together at all that you were in the same class. Did you guys get a lot of media coverage because of Kevin Love? Because, he was pretty well known in the state at the time. What was that like?
And I think it was cool just for like opportunities of, you get to travel on these tournaments during the school year. We spent one Christmas in Florida, which was interesting, but it's I don't know, you don't really think about it at the time, just because you're almost like you're enmeshed in it. So you're trying to, in my case, just like trying to get minutes.
Yeah.
And also with Kevin specifically, it's just interesting because, you look at like the speculation around prospects, and like, I remember at the time they were trying to say like Kevin and Kyle Singler were like neck and neck. And there's no shade to Kyle Singler, but they weren't. Like, and just watching that up close, watching, doing off-season workouts where you're around like, college players, like I had the privilege of working out a lot with Pooh Jeter and Jeremiah Dominguez, back in the day, and seeing before, like, Pooh would make an NBA roster, be, like a G League all timer, and seeing that in real time and being like, whoa, but also then watching someone like Kevin step into these and dominate like NBA pros, or like back in time when it was the D League guys. And it's like, okay, no, this is real. I don't feel as bad about myself. Like, this is happening to everyone. So, it was just it was interesting, like I said, because this is the time before you're watching the highlight tapes and there's all this coverage. So it's mostly like you read about people, you see names, and then eventually like people go to college and you put a name to the face, or if you play A, you obviously play all these people. But it was just it was an interesting experience that I kind of like. I think about it now, it's like, oh, okay, that was bigger than what I thought it was, or but in the time, it's just like, honestly, like, you look at a lot of these people with big names and you're like, okay, even if I may not win this, it's a, I don't know, it's like the tanking team that gets up when they play the Warriors or someone, like, all the time.
Yeah. It really struck me when you talked about just like having one sentence written about you, like on Rivals, and like that must have been a big deal for you to like see your name on that. But then you have somebody like Kevin Love, who I remember the whole state just going nuts when he decided to go to California for college, and just like, oh my gosh, imagine being, an 18-year-old in that storm. That must have been wild for him. And I was wondering what it might have been like for the guys around him too. Like if you guys got caught up in any of that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, well, for me, I wouldn't say I got caught up in it, just because, again, I wasn't at that level. But it's interesting in terms of like, we had a lot of guys like cycle out of the program in a way, like, it's like we have this, super team conversation in the NBA now, but you look at high school, it's like there's certain, talk about Jesuit earlier, Jeff, back when Jeff was, or back when it was 5A and Jeff was, or back when 5A was the top thing and Jeff was competing against everyone, South Medford, LO, especially during those years with Kevin. And I remember, like, my freshman year, there's a bunch of guys who went on to play like D1 or D2 ball who transferred out because of just, our coach at the time was kind of a dirtbag. So anyways, like, it's this weird thing where in most schools where you have the opportunity, you're bringing in a guy who's could be, an NBA player at that time, people are thinking, never mind who he became. And you already have these guys who, again, are set on the college track. Like, this was supposed to be like a dynasty for years and years and years to come. But because just like all of the other weird stuff that happens at LO, they, they left and like, no, we're not going to be a part of this. And no one, like, Kevin was good enough so that didn't matter. And the team was still competitive. Obviously won the state title, but it's just a lot of the politics of it, I guess, is the other part, where it's not so much the media coverage as it is the politics around high school basketball, youth sports is also, very dispiriting. So like, for as annoying as like that sentence and that coverage or whatever was, it's more so just like, when I think about the stories my parents would come home and talk about, just like the conversations in the stands, when I think about how certain teammates of mine were treated during that time, that still like sticks with me in just a really bad way. That's really the stuff that stays. So like and obviously, again, the media coverage, the attention definitely fueled a lot of sort of like that atmosphere. There's no way it didn't, but you just kind of get, I don't know, you're more immersed in that like immediate politics around you. That makes sense.
One of the things that Rose and I, that's consistently been of interest to us as we learn more about players and where they came from and the road that they traveled to get to where they are, is we're always like really interested in that whole high school to college transition, and just like what that must be like to be like a 17-year-old going through all of that. And like the last episode we talked about Trendon Watford, and Trendon's team I think won state like 3 years in a row, and just like how and he was like Mr. Alabama basketball for like 2 full years for junior and senior year. And it's just always interesting to me, like what we don't talk so much about. We talk about high school experience in terms of like how ready are you going to be for the NBA, but I like to sometimes pause and just like kind of think about what was that like just like as a person when it's kind of like with college there's like a path to there's more of a little bit defined path from college to the NBA, or now like G League or wherever into the NBA. But that whole like high school world is just very intriguing, and I'm always wanting to know more about that.
What was funny about that time was again, because Kevin was on a track for high D level or high D1 NBA, so like his trainer was working with our team during like conditioning and all that stuff. So it's one of the benefits of having a player at that level is you get access to like, hey, this is the guy that works with the stars, or the coach of the stars type thing. You get these NBA level workouts and conditioning plans and stuff. So again, it's like a flip side of one. You're just like, you feel like obviously like you're in the shadow of this person, but also just like the access and like perspective you get, and just opportunities to build your game in different ways, I think is that also sticks.
One of the things that I remember reading about when I was researching Matisse Thybulle, was that he was really like first discovered in high school for UW because his coach went to scout Zach LaVine, and he was playing against Zach LaVine because they're both from like Washington. But I think about it's really interesting to think about the guys who maybe like, because of that access you're talking about, or like playing adjacent to a guy who is a super like on the superstar track or whatever, gets the opportunity to be scouted by somebody who didn't intend to scout them. And I don't think that necessarily happens all the time, but I know that it has happened. And like, so I was thinking about like when I went to high school, I went to Churchill High School. I graduated from South Eugene High School in Eugene, but I went to Churchill High School for 2 years. And Jordan Kent went to Churchill High School with me. He's a year younger than me. And I remember like everybody being really excited about Jordan Kent playing basketball, because his dad was the coach at the U of O at the time. But one of the things I think was really interesting is Jordan was like a really amazing track athlete. He set like state records that I think are still standing today in like long jump and triple jump, and like he was and he was an amazing sprinter. And like he did run track at the U of O, but like people didn't think of him as a track athlete first. They thought of him as a basketball athlete first because of his dad. And it makes me wonder if like his dad had been a track coach instead of a basketball coach, if his career might have looked very, very differently, because like he was like a world-class track athlete in high school. He was incredible. And he was very good at basketball too. But like, I mean, I don't know anything about his like desires or his what he wanted for himself, but I know that like everybody assumed his default like route was going to be basketball. And when he went to play football, like when we were in college, he like just started playing football for Coach Bellotti like his junior year, just because I think he got recruited because he's just super, super fast. That was really random too. That felt like a left turn. I was like, oh, you're gonna get drafted to the NFL? This is a wild ride. But also like, he was still running track at that time, and he was still an amazing track runner. So I don't know. It makes me wonder if like maybe the attention that was like that was shined on him early on in his career because his dad was a basketball coach, like made his path a little bit different than it might have been had he not had that expectation about his career.
It's funny you say that, because I remember there's a time where like Kevin was more of a baseball prospect than he was a basketball prospect. But I think I imagine like around high school, he made the choice to just like, do this basketball thing. But like, those was from the, middle school days and whatnot. Still remember that guy's like, the pitcher. Because again, it's a gigantic man or a gigantic kid can throw the ball really hard. Yeah. But yeah, I think so much of this is like circumstance. I mean, we talked about Miami earlier, even with Trendon Watford, again, going undrafted, but when you find, this isn't the cleanest transition, but, just that's what I love about teams, and especially like coaches who do player development, where you just get guys in certain situations where it may not work out on this team or that team or, during the draft process, but you get in there and you see this person. Like I said, it's not the person you were looking for. Maybe it's not the person who came to the pre-draft workout who's like the headline name, but then you find these people, same way Blazers got Jabari. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Just say that.
I kind of forgot about Kevin Love and baseball, but I actually do remember now people talking about how he and Klay Thompson were on like the same little league team in Lake Oswego.
Yep. Yeah. No, my friend still talks about it because when people do these lists of like greatest Oregon players, and granted, like Klay played basketball and made big name in California, so it's fair. But a lot of guys remember again Klay from Little League, and they're like, why don't we get to claim Klay too? Like, I don't know.
he still talks about Burkerville every now and again in interviews when he's asked about like Oregon, which I think is really funny. I'm like, that's not even like a top 10 burger here, but like I guess when you were a kid it probably was, because that's like where you would go after like games and stuff.
It was a top 10 burger for a long time.
Yeah, that's probably true. Also, it's like I feel like the vibe of Burgerville now is very different than it was like 20 years ago.
I'll still stop at Burgerville if I see one.
I still always stop at the last one going south. Because like I go to Eugene, but there's not one in Eugene, so I'll stop in like Albany because they're always like, this is the last Burgerville. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll stop.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to our next topic, and we're going to dive a little bit more into the media. Now, Bruce, we talked about before logging in about you, both of you went to the J school at U of O, and you of course have some experience doing journalism and media. So I thought this would be a great time to just kind of like talk about like the state of it right now, especially with regards to sports. And I don't know if did you ever cover sports? Was that ever a desire of yours, or were you always thinking about doing, a different kind of journalism or maybe a broader kind of journalism?
Yeah, I've done some like sports related stories here and there over time. I think I applied to the paper at the University of Oregon, the Daily Emerald, 3 times. I want to say the first 2 times, actually, no, that they were all actually sports stories or sports related stories. But I think the first 2 were kind of more straightforward, didn't work out. And then I did one like right after, LeBron and the decision, which is more of a like it's sports, but like political angle. And that was the one that kind of like got me in. I think that, so I kind of like took on I don't know, I just was thinking to myself or approaching at the time and saying, like maybe sports coverage, like straightforward is probably not going to be my thing. Like I obviously enjoy talking about sports, analyzing, watching, but also it's kind of one of those things where I don't know, like you feel, I don't want to say like feel too close to it, but it's like, as I thought about it in retrospect, I was like, when I did this more, would I not like this as much as I do? Like, so, I say all that to say, sometimes I do sports related things, but it's definitely, I don't think it was ever going to be a big focus when I really got serious. It's just kind of like, hey, I have this in the toolbox if people are interested,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's interesting that, thinking about whether or not would I still like this if I was covering it all the time, because sometimes I look at some of the media out there, I'm like, do you really like this anymore? anymore? Have you maybe been doing this too long and you don't really like it anymore? So then my next question is for both of you. Like, how are you all feeling about the coverage of Blazers and just like basketball in general? We've talked about this a little bit earlier in the year about just how like the narrowing of opportunities, like for like real or like regional sports networks, and just like having less access, through, because of budget cuts and, different things. But where are we feeling right now about how the Blazers are covered and how like the NBA at large is covered?
So can I just say that the one hard thing for me about being a Blazer fan is always that, like, unless someone is like their job is like they're on the Blazer beat, I feel like we're always like a side character in NBA journalism. Like there's very like Dame was like the first player that we had like for a long time that commanded like national attention and people like writers to come out and cover him in like an in-depth and meaningful way, because he like I think he did a good job of like carving out his like niche and like what kind of like what his brand was going to be in the NBA, which is different than the kind of player you're going to be in the NBA, which is weird, but like your brand and who you are as a player are like not the same thing. But like I can't remember players or like players before Dame being covered in this way that was like, we're here to talk about you as the main character, not like the way you fit in as a side character into this larger storyline that I really want to write about, which is the Celtics, the Lakers, the Heat, the what, like. And so like I have like a very complicated relationship, I think, with national media because they've always treated us that way until there was reason like Dame to not, but they're going to go back to treating us that way. And I need to remember that because like I'm not that interested in like reading a lot of these people regularly, I'll say, even if I enjoy some of the articles that they do write that are about my team. Like that's this I just think of it as a very temporary situation when they write something like that's focused on the Blazers and not just like us as a side character. Like we're not part of the Avengers. Maybe sometimes we get to be Doctor Strange, but probably not. Like we're a side character. We're gonna be like, brought in when it serves a larger story, but it's not going to be like necessarily as fair to us as it is to the LeBrons or the, I don't know, Jason Tatums of the world.
I just kind of look at, I feel like I sound like a broken record, but I feel like Blazers Twitter is a hellscape. Like I I don't know, and part of it might just be this moment in time where it's kind of, you know, where the future of the franchise is going is, a question. But like national media, to your point, Rose, about just the Blazers being a side character. I don't know, it's one of those things where it's just like I just kind of like accept it. Like it's just this is what's gonna happen. Like it's nice that, again, Dame gets a little more coverage than, like you said, probably anyone or anyone the team has had since at least that, early 2000s, late 90s. And even that was a time where
It's like
that
Jailblazers coverage.
yeah. So it was not the greatest template for how, and I think that also when we talk about just like Dame discourse specifically, I feel like it's a thing that a lot of people are discounting, but that's another topic. National media, like Terry, you're saying, just the economic situations, there's budget cuts, regional media is in flux at best, and people are kind of going to, what is going to get the clicks, what's going to get the eyeballs, because that's the one thing you can go to, and it's conflict, it's tension. It's the same kind of least common denominator stuff, they'd see just doing newsroom coverage in general. So, we've seen the kind of like Skip Baylessification of sports media, and like it's frustrating. And it's one thing for like the people who are they have their jobs and this is what they do. But I think the thing that's kind of irked me a little bit, where it's like, because that's all people are seeing, that's what people mimic. That's how people engage, just kind of like in general. And again, I always wonder, do people realize they're doing this, or is it just kind of like a reflex at this point? So, right now it's this weird cognitive dissonance where we're watching the Miami Heat in the finals. Half of their team, well, 7 players, were not drafted. But we are speculating on, if we throw this draft or we trade this draft pick, are we going to ruin the franchise forever? If we do this, are we going to ruin the franchise? It's like, isn't there going to be a draft next year? And the year after that, aren't players going to be available? Isn't it? Couldn't we, I don't know, develop people? Aren't there options here? And then also with Damian Lillard, like the same way national media often discounts him, I think the thing that's kind of gone unsaid is just how a lot of people locally discount what he's done. Like, this was supposed to be a rebuild when LaMarcus left. Like, obviously there are other players on the team, but like the reason that didn't happen is because you had a transcendent player who people didn't realize at the time was a transcendent player, literally willing the team out of that. And it's like, that doesn't just happen. That doesn't just, I don't know, when people talk to me about the prospects of what they do and they talk about, I love what Utah's doing, or I love what OKC is doing. I'm like, what do they have in common? Oh yeah, they haven't won anything. That's right. That's a great model. Why are we doing this? But that's like the conversation right now. It's just speculation and misery. And I get it, but also it's kind of distressing, kind of frustrating. And some of it just feels like, do we see what's happening here?
And also, do we have to be miserable, like, if we never win a championship? Because the odds are it's super hard to win a championship. So could we just do our best to enjoy what's ahead of us? Because there's all kinds of, in my personal opinion, there's all kinds of things to enjoy about an NBA season, even if your team doesn't win it all. Would I love them to win a championship? Of course. Like, I understand it. It's not like I don't get that, but how can we not find something to enjoy about this sport, which is entertainment, which is entertaining? I think I told Rose this last time. I was listening to a national show where they were talking about the Celtics and about how they built this team and look what they got, a bunch of trips to the Eastern Conference Finals. And I'm like, that sounds pretty good to me.
Right?
But that's not how they meant it. They were like, and look what they got. And I'm like, repeated trips to the Eastern Conference Finals. That seems pretty good to me. But there's so much, like, everybody has to, like, I think part of it also is everybody feels like they have to have an opinion. And one of the things that we talk about on this podcast a lot is our extremely liberal use of the mute button, which does make Twitter less of a horrible place to be, because you can mute so much of that out, which I have done. So I'm like, la 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 la, because I've muted out a lot of the negative words, and I keep going, do not make me mute Damian Lillard, the term Damian Lillard, because so many people are putting him. But like the other day, I was like, I might have to just mute the term Damian Lillard to not see your trades, your proposed trades. Anyway, we love the mute button.
We did an icebreaker a few weeks ago that was like your favorite blocked terms on Twitter. Because that's just like it's a quality of life thing. I wanted to say I really appreciate the way you were thinking about like, oh, you're not going to ruin your team with X, Y, or Z. Like, it's always like a doomsday scenario, no matter what the scenario is. Like that, I think that's the media. I don't know if the fans reflect that of the media or the media reflects that of the fans, but either way, that's the dynamic that we're in right now. And I always think about how, like, we always consider players and like as like immutable value, when, like, let's be honest, some players are more valuable in certain systems than others, and some players are are what better suited to a certain role or another role. Like, I don't know, like some, like when we, so a good example to me is like when we took Gary Payton from the Warriors, he was not what he was with the Warriors because the system wasn't the same. He didn't bring the same value. Like, not every player's like contribution or value is like, it's not static, like different guys fit into different places better. And to think that you're going to ruin your team with X, Y, or Z move is like really like an assumption, like a lot of assumptions based on what you think that player is or isn't, and like how they fit into what your team is trying to do. Which, I mean, as fans, I don't even think we even have a good grasp on necessarily what kind of thing they're trying to do. So how do we know how good a fit a player is and how good they're going to be here, other than the fact that we're like, oh, so and so is a great player? I'm like, well, you know what? So and so, this other guy, what was his name? What's his name? Caleb, the guy on the Heat.
Martin.
Oh,
Caleb
Caleb
Martin.
Martin.
Caleb Martin. I always want to call him Kenyon Martin, but that's not right. Caleb Martin, like, there was a bunch of people who didn't think that he was worth much, and look at him now. Like, it's just kind of, it's all based on a lot of assumptions that are like untested, and that's always so weird to me that people think it's a doomsday scenario when we really don't know like what ingredients we're cooking with over here or what dish they're trying to make.
I mean, I love that point. Just, I always think back on, we all have our takes and our, in these debates and whatnot. And I look back on, so with one friend in particular, like that bubble season when the Blazers picked up Trevor Ariza, and it was like, wow, an actual 3-and-D small forward. This is nice. And, it was temporary, but we got into a big debate when they made the trade for why is the name?
Jeremy Grant.
No. He plays for the Clippers now.
Rodney Hood.
No, Norman Powell.
Norman Powell.
The other
Robert Covington.
Jeez, how am I?
Nick Batum. They all played
Yeah, I know.
Blazers at one point.
This is a good point. But because me and his friend, like, we kind of fall on the lines like, I'm the eye test guy, he's the analytics guy, and that all the tropes of that.
Yeah.
And he's trying to tell me, did you see Robert Covington's 3-point percentage? This is going to be such a better fit than Ariza. And I was the whole time, because part of why I'm saying this now is just in case he ever watches this, because I want to remind him every time that he was wrong about that. But it's like, they're not the same player. It's not the same fit. I like Rocco as a player, but it's not going to be the same thing. But if you're just looking at a piece of paper and saying, and also, again, system, Rocco was coming out of Houston playing with D'Antoni, where he empowers everyone to shoot. It's going to be different if you put that with any other coach, period. So, like you said, like we don't go to the practices. We're not right there, but everyone, we have to have a take. So we kind of like fall into these things. And it's so much more to that. Some of the stuff you can predict, like I did with Ariza and Rocco, but for the most part, we're just kind of throwing it out there based on whatever, perspective, wherever we lie.
So we one of the things that I wanted to do with y'all here today was to talk about the people who we do trust, who we do turn to for the media, maybe people who are there in the gym, or people who do the balance of the eye test and the analytics and put them together in a way that makes sense. So let's spend a little time just sharing maybe some of who it is that we believe in, that we trust for our coverage. Bruce, do you want to start?
Sure. So let me just preface this, and we talked about this before we hit record, where going to the University of Oregon Journalism School, they used to have a class called InfoHell, aka information gathering. And the basic idea is you make this like 120-page research paper, you annotate a bunch of sources. So the actual paper itself is like 10%. The rest is just, annotations, citing sources, basically like, I watched this interview. This is who pays the company, or this is who's funding the company that put out this interview. This is where their biases are. This is, where they've had mistakes in the past or not. This is where they've got accolades, and just going through that with, again, 90% of that paper. So I say that to say, sifting through sources and being able to filter out everything, not accepting anything as like, this is 100% credible. This is 0% credible. Like, it's, everything is in a gray area, and you have to kind of understand it in context. So that's kind of like how we talk about how this media system, especially where it's tension and arguments all the time. So it's like, I feel like I get Blazer news by filtering through that. And there's some people, I think Sean Hyken comes to mind as someone who, I'm not even sure if I follow him, but I have like the For You page on Twitter. So his updates come up all the time. But generally, I found that to be pretty reliable myself, where it's just like updates. It's, it's not, not all the just drowning in speculation. He might have other tweets that are, but at least what filters to me is generally good coverage. So I'll give him a shout out.
I like Sean too, and for some of the same reasons as he doesn't editorialize as much as some of the other guys. And I appreciate he's like independent, so he does his own thing. You subscribe to his newsletter, like that's how you access a lot of his writing. And independent people, like as you were saying, aren't funded by a big company with other vested interests. And I mean, obviously he's retains his access to the team, but as an independent journalist, he can kind of like write what he wants without like somebody telling him, you have to cover it this way, you have to write this, you have to farm these clicks. Like, I remember one time he wrote an article toward the end of the season, once it was clear the Blazers had like shut down Dame, and he was like, I didn't want to write about this loss, so I didn't. And he wrote something completely different when normally he covers every other game. And I was like, I never felt closer to a journalist as a fan than in that moment where he was like, I didn't feel like writing about this. You don't want to read about it, and I don't want to write about it. So I wrote about something different. And I'm like, thank you. Like, I know that somebody who worked for a big like publication or organization could not have that freedom. The person would be forced to cover that game, no matter how miserable it was to write about it. And he just made the decision to be like, nope, this is my outfit and I'm not doing it. And I was like, nobody wants to read a recap of a game where the guys were tanking. Thank you.
Sean is definitely one of the sources that I follow and trust as well. And one of the things I appreciate about his coverage too is he keeps his ear out for the things that are bubbling up that may be like turn into something bigger, or maybe rumors, and he'll like go and try to like, follow up on them and do the research that I don't, know to do. He just came out with one, it was today or yesterday, about, okay, here's what the actual trade scenarios for Damian Lillard are available. While everybody's out, has already like put it in the trade machine and said, okay, this works. He actually outlined, okay, here's what's reasonable to expect and here's not. And so I like how he kind of keeps his ear to the things that are bubbling up, and then we'll do the research and address those so that we can kind of know where it stands. All right. Well, I'll go next. One of the people, although I'm a little mad at him this week, but one of the people that I trust for national news as well as Damian Lillard coverage is Chris Haynes. I have him on notification because, again, he has that player access, and I think he's also a great storyteller. So you get very little from him that's without context. It might take a few tweets, or it might take him talking about it, like it might not fit into the 200 characters to give the context, but because he's so used to telling stories, and because he also has the access and the trust of many of the players, I trust him, and I like his stories, and I trust him. He has a new podcast out that he does with Mark Stein, and I'm not haven't been as wild about Mark Stein, just because he feels really it's just probably a matter of like nerves being on a podcast, which I can totally relate to. And Chris Haynes has just like been doing it for a really long time, but I've started to like them as a duo together more. They kind of complement each other. Have you guys ever listened to that? It's called This League Uncut.
I haven't, but
I listened to the one he did. He had a different podcast
Yeah.
before that, didn't he? That's the
Yeah.
one I listened to. I haven't listened to this new one.
Yeah, he had one just by himself. But yeah, that's one for me. Hey Rose, what about for you? Do you have anybody that you trust that you look to?
So here's the thing about that. I said this to you before when we were talking about doing this podcast. I get a little bit to who I trust by a process of elimination of who I don't trust. And it also, like, I think it relates to topic areas. So like for some reporters I very much trust on certain topic areas, and other ones I would trust in some contexts but not others. And but I'll say one of the best sources to me in like the modern NBA for NBA information is players. And now that we have greater access to players through social media, a lot of players talk a lot more to the public about themselves and about their team and their career. And the reason why I say that is because I think that players give great quotes that are often taken out of context by reporters. And so what I mean by going to the players is I mean that, like, when I see articles that are written about X, Y, or Z thing that happened that was inflammatory and everybody wants to click on it, I like to go to like YouTube or wherever to find the full video of where they gave that quote in a press conference, because usually that quote says something different than what the click article says. So I guess maybe it's like just like the media that I trust is like the transparency that the NBA has built into like the press conference like situation, because I can't tell you how many times I see Dame his words twisted from an interview where he gave a very thoughtful answer and all people heard was, no, I'm not going to Miami or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it just like they want to twist it into something that's inflammatory that people will click on, that will fuel speculation. And like usually almost always there's a really reasonable explanation for what happened in front of a camera into a microphone. So as far as like, I guess like the media that I trust is, I guess I just trust the people who give me the most uncut access to the players, who don't, I don't know, pull crappy quotes. When as soon as I see a guy who's pulled a crappy quote to stick it in a headline so that everybody will click on it, I'm like, no, shame corner, not clicking on you for a while. I'm gonna mute you for a month. Ramona Shelburne.
it's funny you talk about the press conferences, because I'm always conflicted on just from like the construction of it. It's knowing like from the reporters to the players, everyone involved hates them for understandable reasons, because like you just got, whether you won or you lost, it's a stressful situation. Everyone's packed into a room trying to get their question off. Everyone's stressed and reacting to each other in front of cameras. So sometimes that makes TV magic. A lot of times that makes a lot of frustration, but also sometimes turns into TV magic. But, if you're trying to efficiently get people's thoughts after a game out there to the public, I understand why you do it. But that said, like when you talked about just the process of elimination, because like I'll be honest, like I follow the toxic takeosphere / people funded, it's weird when I say this, but like people funded by different gambling operations coverage, because that's a big thing. And we talked about budget cuts earlier, so even then I'm conflicted, because of like, okay, what is, journalists do need to be paid to cover things, to get this coverage off. And I don't know, is DraftKings actually much worse than the Doritos, Locos, whatever thing I keep seeing? I don't know, but I often feel like I have to reverse engineer if I'm trying to like get to some truth in there, where yeah, I'll start with the inflammatory take or the meme or something, and then, like I said, yeah, look up the interview. Understand who is it this person, again, who pays this person, who pays this operation, and what truth can I find out of that? And Tara, you mentioned Chris Haynes earlier. One, just because he was, a Portland writer or Portland, doing the Portland coverage for a while. So I feel like I appreciate, the familiarity and knowing him. And then I do also appreciate his coverage. And I think one of the side, just all the Dame stuff, we're in the space of speculation. There's, just the very public negotiations happening through all these filters. And it's actually kind of funny to me in this part of, I don't know what's going to happen, but just all the shots at Boston actually kind of amuse me, because it's like in the same way. And I didn't like how the Grizzlies leaked the whole "we're not bringing Dylan Brooks back under no circumstances" thing. I thought that was wild. But on the flip side, I kind of like how the messaging of, yeah, under no circumstances is Dame interested in Boston, that just keeps coming through these stories. Nothing else seems very, tight or defined, but the fact that you had to have Jason Tatum come on an IG Live and be like, why do you hate Boston so much? Just every chance there is to be like, Dame is not interested in Boston in like subtle, sometimes hilarious ways. It's just amusing.
Do you have anybody else on your list that you like to go to for your Blazer or NBA news?
Ooh.
You, Bruce.
Oh. Yeah. I don't know if it'll be, again, maybe not so much news as just like the lead-in point to look up the news.
Mm-hmm.
So like I like Bomani on.
That's such a good point.
Yeah. The
lead-in point to look at the news, because you two both just spent time talking about how all the extra work that you go to that you have to go through to decide whether or not how to take what this thing was that you've already read. Anyway, sorry, Bomani.
Oh yeah, so Bomani Jones, who most known for his work at ESPN, so like Dan Le Batard, and so like that whole crew out in Florida, mostly, again, known for a long time, ESPN person now, Meadowlark Media, and also part of that very much, I don't know if it's DraftKings or one of the other ones, but again, part of this new landscape and what's funding sports coverage. So, again, I go there for the takes. Sometimes, I hate to admit it, but sometimes I will watch Stephen A. Smith just as like, it's like visual coffee sometimes. Yeah. It's just like, if I need some energy, like I'm not even paying attention, but Stephen A. Smith would be very just be screaming in the background about something. It's like, other times it's just like I can't do it. But so yeah.
Okay, wait, I have a question about Stephen A. Smith. Mm-hmm. Did you watch his video after the Knicks were eliminated from the playoffs and he talked about how he wanted Damian Lillard?
I didn't watch that, but that's kind of like been his thing for a minute, of just like trying to not subtly at all like appeal to try and get Dame to come to New York. And I don't know, I like, Knicks fans are funny to me. Just in general, like, remember the beginning of the season, it's like bing bong, this is the year. The Knicks have won 3 games in a row. Whoa. Yeah.
I highly recommend that video that he posted right after the Knicks were eliminated, because it's like he took it on his cell phone of himself. It's so dramatic, and if you're in the right mood, it's like just high comedy. It's just like, it's like, I don't know. If you want to watch him for the entertainment value, it's a highly entertaining video. For like news, though, I'm with you. It's like, what can you possibly glean from Stephen A?
I feel like some people do watch and like try and take him seriously, and I don't recommend it personally, but like, if you're watching those guys as like pro wrestling characters, it translates,
Reality TV.
Yeah.
Wrestling is just reality TV for men. That's what I have come to appreciate. It's like that's what men's reality TV like, and it's been on TV longer than like Vanderpump Rules. Like I had friends in high school that were like, I can't go out to tonight is Raw.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm sorry. Like you can't miss your soap opera.
Yeah, it's more like, I would say it's more like a soap opera than like reality TV. Because the thing about reality TV is that it's actually reality. It might be like, anyway,
Scripted,
not gonna
edited.
What I was gonna say is, Bruce, you've mentioned it a couple of times, like, and I don't know how to feel about the fact that there's so much gambling money supporting the coverage of sports. That just seems weird to me. But like, I guess they're the ones with all the money, and are we just gonna have to like, okay, give over to that?
It's interesting. A friend had brought this up to me because you see the like the advertising is just there all the time. Like it's not just commercials. It's literally in the middle of the game. Let's talk about this parlay we have, or are you going to bet on this? Like throughout the game, and it's one of those things where like I don't know, like I'm not a gambler, so I don't think about it as much. But then for asking me, isn't it weird that you have Charles Barkley of all people talking about what play he's going to put a bet on in the middle of the quarter? Isn't that a little tasteless? And that's kind of what really made me think about it in terms of like, it's one thing if we have this again, if you look at who's doing the advertising of all these games, beer, fast food, insurance, beer, fast food, insurance, car, you know. So it's the entities with money, but like what are like all these institutions are, I guess, like partners, and like what regulations are we putting on there? Because it seems just like completely unfettered right now in a way that, again, you have Charles Barkley very out there, and I don't know if he's ever like said, I actually have a gambling problem. I think the quote has been like, I have the money to do it. But it's, if you just like look at it just a little bit, it's just like, this feels a little tasteless and kind of reckless. So,
And we love nothing more than complaining about the referees in this context.
Oh yeah.
And it's just kind of, I don't know. I haven't put the whole thing together in my mind to figure out what exactly makes me uncomfortable about it. But it's just something weird. And it's just, during the pandemic, I had a week where I tried to learn how to gamble and I couldn't figure out how to make the apps work. And so I moved on. Maybe if I'd gotten really into it, then I would have a different take, but it just didn't add that much to my enjoyment of the game. I wanted to talk about one more sort of quasi media thing that I enjoy. And again, it's a podcast. I just love podcasts. I consume so much through my ears. That's just the best way for me to understand things. And there's one called the Basketball Illuminati. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard about that. It has Tom Haverstraw, Amin Alissan, and Anthony Mays is like the producer of it. And what I like about it is it's funny. It's, they talk about like conspiracy theories, or they like spin up their own conspiracy theories, but they always go back to trying to find out like, where did this come from? Like if they're talking about a conspiracy theory, their whole thing is to go like kind of what you guys have just discussed, go back to like, where did it come from? But they have like extra access, and they also look at it from like a sort of an entertaining point of view. So they'll go and they'll like, one of the things, like when you're watching a game and they'll be like, this is the first time in 40 years that someone had 27, 5, and 12 in 34 minutes or less. And they'll go back and go, okay, that might be true, but should we care about that? And I just appreciate them questioning, because what I tend to do when I hear something is like a hot topic is I'll just be like, I'm always like, huh? Like, why are we talking about this? That's kind of like always my first thing is, why are we talking about this? And like, should I spend any more time thinking about this? And I feel like they sort of approach things that way, and they do all the hard work for me. So I can just sit back and listen to them. I don't know if you guys have ever listened to that one, but I really like it.
I don't listen to that podcast, but like Tom and me again, they do a bunch of stuff with the W.H.A.T show, including they do they do a post game for the finals, so that's probably like my favorite one because it's a combination of analysis of the game, but then also just random goofy stuff from literally like being on the court post game. So it's like, you'll get analysis of whatever celebrities happen to be walking around. When they were in Denver, Amin was like heavy on like the altitude is not real, it's a myth. And then they literally pan out to have him try and prove it by running up and down the stairs and pretending like he's not winded. They're like, okay, fine. Amin, say the alphabet twice. Don't take a breath. It's just goofy stuff like that mixed in, but like, so you get, like I said, you get the analysis, you get the fun with it. And because they're actual basketball backgrounds, acumens, obviously you get that as well. But yeah, so I've heard of the Basketball Illuminati. I haven't checked it out yet, but I do enjoy their work in that regard.
Well, and it goes back to like what we talked about earlier about they just seem to enjoy it. And some, we're not going to talk about the people that I don't want to talk about the people that I don't like. We've talked about, going through processes of elimination, but I feel like there's some people locally who've been at it for like a really, 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 really long time. And I'm like, do you still like this? Like you seem, you seem kind of miserable from your tweets. And so when you watch a show like that, where people are clearly still having fun with it, and like, they understand that it's a serious business, it's a big business, but it's also entertainment, and getting down to that and being able to like capture that in their coverage, I really appreciate.
I feel like that's what like Rob Perez does for a lot of people, is like Rob Perez still really loves basketball. Even when he hates basketball, he loves basketball. And that's like really like, I think that feels very relatable. Like, and I wouldn't say, I don't know you would call him like media press. I don't know, but he's like he very much is involved in like the social media aspect of publicizing the NBA. But he's still very much a fan. And like I'll say I have a deep appreciation for the people who work in media that still love basketball, and you can tell they love it and are still fans, or who still love sports in general. I think that just like being able to still love the thing that you set out to do as a career and not like mostly be miserable, like Tara said, because you set your career path and you can't get off of it. Like I don't know, like I'm really like to follow the people that you can still tell that they love being a fan as well as being a writer, reporter, whatever.
I love that mention of Rob Perez. I think Josiah Johnson's another one who kind of falls along that line. And that was one of the ones that actually also got me thinking about the role of gambling again, because again, Rob Perez is just like his stuff shows up in my feed and it's like, oh, I enjoy this. Oh, I like this. Let me share this. And then finally I just like clicked on it and it's like something at Underdog Fantasy. I was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. Because I think someone had made God, whose interview, maybe it was on the W.H.A.T show, but they were talking about the emergence of a lot of these guys who people mostly know on Twitter versus, the traditional path. And to that point about just like loving the game and like still loving basketball despite being in the media, because I think about these things again, that press conference, like if you are in that environment, I can understand how it can be hard to still love the game if you are arguing with the players you cover, ever after every game. I can understand how that could wear you down. So, like you said, I love when you see people still enjoy this, even if it's like, was an executive. Now he's the media figure. I don't know anything about Amin personally. I don't know him, but it feels like he is enjoying this media role, right? It feels like that's what fit in. So yeah, like I said, I love that. Yeah, just being able to have some fun with this, still covering substance, having, real conversation, but I feel like you said, like that, I don't know, that like that jumps off the page for people.
Mhm. Well, we should probably start to wrap it up here. But I appreciate this discussion, and yeah, please keep sharing things that you do like, because I'm always looking for new stuff. I'll stick with something for a while, and then I'll kind of move on to something else, and then I'll get into something else. But I'm sort of gearing up for the day that I can't handle Twitter anymore, which makes me so sad because there are so many things that I love about it, but it's already just not feeling the same. But I don't know what's going to replace it for me, because if you want to get like live, active, random takes on a game while it's happening and make it the largest possible fire hose of stuff so you can find the good stuff, like, I don't know what's better than Twitter for that. So if anybody has any ideas. But we should probably, like I said, we should probably start wrapping it up here. Rose, do you want to take us through our takes?
Yeah. Okay, so it is June 11th. We talked a lot about basketball media today. We're about to go into summer. We're about to go into summer league. The world is your oyster. So I'd love to know, you guys, what is your take today? Kara, do you want to start?
Sure, I will start. My take today, and I can't remember what my take was 2 weeks ago. So if this is completely opposite, then, whatever, things change. Been thinking a lot, of course, about the draft because it is coming up. And I think the Blazers are gonna use the third pick, and they're going to keep the player on their team with it. That is my take as of today. It could change in another week. But as of June 11th, I think the Blazers are going to, I think, because I don't think they're going to need to. I think they're going to be able to accomplish what they've been trying to accomplish in terms of bringing a veteran with other means. And then they're still going to be able to use their three. That's my take.
So you think that they're going to keep the three and they're going to make a big trade? It's like trade Ant or something.
They'll do something else.
Okay.
With the 23rd, with the 43rd, with people, but they have multiple paths. And
That
I
does
don't
not
think it has to be the number 3.
That does not conflict with your take from
Okay.
last time. Your
Glad
take
somebody
last,
remembers.
yeah, your take last time was that you didn't think that anything was going to be settled on draft night, that we wouldn't know what was going to happen at all in any way, shape, or form. That was your take.
Thank you for remembering.
Bruce, what about you? What's your take today?
So I say this as, and granted, I haven't done a huge study, but from 1 or 2 G League games I've watched, I really, really like Scoot Henderson if he falls to 3. Also, I think we should absolutely trade the pick and just go for it. Go for it with Dame. Let, even if it does not work out, I feel like we have an obligation to arguably the best player in franchise history, guy who, just a few months ago scored 71 points in a game. That was fun to watch, wasn't it? Why don't we keep doing this? Yeah, just I think it's fun when the team at least goes for it. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but maybe people have watched San Antonio when it's time to tank and go do that. That time will always be there. I remember the early 2000s. Ah Sung-jin came to one of our practices. We don't need to do that again. So, or we don't need to rush into that, I should say. We don't need to romanticize that because it doesn't usually work out. So I was going to say, I hope, obviously I don't have any inside knowledge, but I hope the Blazers try and do the 2008 Celtics move and hope for the best.
All right. That's I like that take because I think that it's something that we haven't seen here in Portland. Like we haven't seen like a big risk being taken. And my take actually was going to be something else, but now my take is kind of related to your take because I was inspired. And I think that if Jody Allen wants to spend a little money now to make a little money later and also earn herself some good PR, she will give Joe Cronin the green light to spend and like go big. Because right now, like, she's taking a lot of heat about this fictional Phil Knight trying to buy a team that's not for sale thing. Which, by the way, like, I don't think that that's the flex that he thinks that it is. It's just like, I'm trying to buy this thing that's people are saying is not for sale and I want it so bad and I'm gonna pay for it. I'm like, that's some entitled billionaire shit. Excuse me, you can edit that out. But like, I'm sorry, that is like that is like peak billionaire stuff. I'm trying to buy something that's not for sale. But I do think that she could take a big risk as a team owner, as someone who everybody knows has to sell the team at some point, and try to increase the value of her team and sell it after with maybe two big stars, with some potential for, you know, being super competitive after the new TV deal is signed. And maybe it's good for her in PR today, and it's good for her to spend a little money today to make a lot more down the road. Because a team with like two superstars on it, even if they haven't won a title together, is like, that's attractive. Like, that's part of the reason why I think that they're never gonna like really trade Dame until after the team has been sold. Like, what, you're gonna sell a rebuilding team? Like, that doesn't really make any sense. Anyway, that's my take.
Awesome. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, again, we are closing, so we definitely don't have time for this, but I will just say that the whole Phil Knight, Jody Allen sort of like narrative that keeps kind of like brewing up represents pretty much everything I hate about pro sports. Just, but again, that's a whole different thing about what happens when it's time to either sell teams or renovate arenas, how cities often get extorted, and it's all bad for everyone. But again, that is a whole other long conversation.
Let's put a pin in that one, because when it gets closer, it would be really great to have a conversation with both of you guys who went through that whole research class and can bring all of the research to understand like what may happen when that actually takes place. But for now, Bruce, will you tell folks where they can find your work?
Yeah, so if you want to check out more of the interviews, other content we've done at the Bruce Poinsett Show, you can go to youtube.com/Bruce Poinsett. We also broadcast the show every week at 7 p.m. on the Numbers FM. So that's Numbers with a Z. And it's twitch.tv/the Numbers FM. So again, every week at 7, youtube.com/Bruce Poinsett. And if you'd like to support the work and get access to exclusive content as well as live discussions, you can become a member at patreon.com/Bruce Poinsett. I've actually more recently been doing just some analysis of this sports talk atmosphere, whether it be, you know, covering interviews. They recently, again, Underdog Fantasy did a interview/promotion of a potential Jailblazers documentary. So I go into that. So yeah, patreon.com/Bruce Poinsett if you'd like access to that and you'd like to support my work some more.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate the discussion. And yeah, we could talk there's a whole bunch more stuff that we could have talked about, but we're going to wrap it up here. And let's see, how do I usually take us out of here? You can see it's been 2 whole weeks since I podcast. Reminding folks, they can find the We Have a Take podcast at We Have a Take on Twitter. You can find me at TCB Biggs on Twitter. You can find Rose at Rose L. Harding on Twitter. And let's see. Oh, if you want to join the Discord, you can find the link to that in our show notes. Did I forget anything, Rose?
I think you usually take us out with a song, don't you? Don't you usually sing a song for us?
I don't think I do. But that reminds me that we should thank Shoes and Hoops for our awesome and super cute intro outro music. Thanks, Eric. All right. Thanks, everyone, and go Blazers.